Hey there, folks. This is Screen Watching. My name's Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. Look, I don't want to put us into a box, but we are doing the Minecraft movie this week. So, folks, stick around for that. That's right. How good was that as an intro?
That's clever.
Yeah.
That's very good, yeah.
Yeah, put that one right up there. Something which, there's no way to segue to it. Netflix, it's got a new hospital drama called Pulse. Is it the brand new ER? Is it the Pitt? Is it Grey's Anatomy? Folks, look, stick around. I've got some thoughts. We've been doing a bit of a deep dive into a few other things we've seen during the week. Simon's taken a look at Dogman, which, as I understand, is part dog, part man, all movie. Also, he's taken a look at the Tom Green documentary called This is the Tom Green Documentary. I didn't even know this was a thing. I'm excited to find out more. I checked out a sitcom which purports to be, hey, it's the Golden Girls, but it's middle-aged gay men. It's called Mid-Century Modern, and boy, have I got some thoughts, which is largely related to the fact that no, it is not the Golden Girls. And then also, throughout the month of March, I did something which is just, quite frankly, something I've never thought was even humanly possible, but I watched a movie every day of that month, and so I'm going to talk about my final stretch of films, including, is it maybe the greatest underrated film of all time? It's called Consenting Adults. Folks, we're going to talk about movies, we're talking about TV shows, and it begins right now as we kick off the podcast.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Hey, Simon Foster, this is the Screen Watching Podcast. My name is Screen. Your name continues to be Watching, is that correct?
Yeah, we can go with that. I can be watching. Hello, Daniel. Hello, Screen Watchers the world over. Thank you for joining us this week, which, I don't want to be negative, Dan, but death was all around us this week. And I think we should acknowledge that only a few days ago we lost the great Val Kilmer. One of a few names we lost this week. We also lost Australian director Donald Crombie, who back through the 70s did things like Caddy and a bunch of great Aussie films. And Richard Norton, a local stuntman and action hero who worked alongside some of the great action heroes of the 80s and 90s. But yes, Val Kilmer's passing, not unexpected, been very ill with throat cancer for many years. I found out through the week that his voice in Top Gun Maverick was actually an AI creation. At that point, he'd lost his voice entirely, and they pieced it together with early AI technology, which was masterfully done. So, do you have a favourite Val Kilmer moment or movie that you can reflect on?
Look,
No
I mean,
question without notice.
Look, absolutely. Val Kilmer, he's one of these actors where there's certainly a couple of his films which are amongst my absolute favourites.
Sure.
But when I was thinking about Val Kilmer in his totality as a career, there weren't really that many films that I could point to as films that I'd actually seen. So I think about his debut feature film, A Little Picture called Top Secret!
Absolutely.
Heavily watched in my household as a kid. I've seen that film so many times, Simon. So many times. I knew what skeet shooting was before I knew what the Beach Boys were.
Yeah, look, it is a film that I think it was unfairly compared to Airplane, or Flying High as we call it here in Australia when it came out, because it was the Zucker brothers follow-up to that, ZAZ's follow-up, and it being such a cultural moment, Flying High, that Top Secret was always going to have a hard time living in its tailwind. See what I did there? But when you look at it now, it's every bit as funny, and Val Kilmer is just fantastic in that very early comedy role, something he didn't lean into ever again to any great extent.
Can we just put a pin in Flying High, and we're going to come back and talk about that just before we get on with the reviews. So just hold tight, bit of sizzle. We're getting back to that. The other thing, obviously, as a big sort of DC superheroes guy, him being, the titular Batman in Batman Forever, that was, pretty crucial to my mid-90s cinema viewing. Is he the best Batman? No, but he's definitely in the top 6.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Top 6. An absolute favourite of his.
And of course, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is a great film, and that not only marked a major role for him, but a major return to Hollywood A-list for Robert Downey Jr. after a tough trot. So that is an important film in everyone's filmography. A movie that isn't spoken of as much, and I think it should be, is a movie called The Ghost in the Darkness, which is a film he did with Michael Douglas, in which he played a hired hand who was protecting railway workers from two rogue lines on the African plains, and it is one of the great thrillers and survival stories. I love that. I watched that quite a few times when it first came out. So, The Ghost in the Darkness. I've got a soft spot for The Saint. Him and Elizabeth Shue were a little bit mismatched on screen, but I still find their chemistry like really good and really important. He was a very unique actor in that he sort of eschewed the movie star mold, I guess, a little bit. He could be cast and he could carry a film, but he was never really comfortable being that leading man. I always thought of him as a character actor in a leading man's body sort of thing, and I always found what he did with those sort of parts really interesting.
Yeah, certainly listed the two titles there of his filmography, the things I've always wanted to check out, which is The Saint, which, from my understanding, isn't particularly a great movie, but I've always just wanted to see it. And also Ghost of the Darkness has been pretty high up on things I've been meaning to check out at some point and just never have for whatever reason.
Great film. And he was great as although his face was largely unseen, his presence on screen behind Christian Slater in a few key scenes in True Romance, which I'm going to be controversial here, is after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, my second favourite Quentin Tarantino script. I love True Romance. And he was great as a sort of a mystical Elvis seen in the mirror a few times in that movie. So, like I say, he could bring a lot of star charisma to even the smallest parts. Boy, he had some duds though. He did that what was the Red Planet thing? Was that the one he shot out here in Australia?
Which I think was called Red Planet.
Yeah, when we were all excited about going to Mars, and De Palma did Mission to Mars, and Kilmer did Red Planet. Although it wasn't a great film, and most famously, I guess you could say, maybe he shouldn't have come to Australia to make movies, because he came here to make The Island of Dr. Moreau with Marlon Brando, which is one of the most unwatchable films up on the big screen, but one of the most fascinating behind the scenes stories you'll ever read about it in the making of a movie. And John Frankenheimer, the grizzled old director who took over the production from director Richard Stanley, he's got a famous quote saying, "There's two things I'll never do in my life. One is climb Mount Everest, and two is work with Val Kilmer again." So he had a reputation. Frankenheimer was no soft touch either. He was a hard old school journeyman director, but Val Kilmer had a bit of a reputation for being somewhat challenging, let's say, on set.
Yeah. It's been a really heavy news for things that have got nothing to do with actually watching things on TV, but have all the things to do with watching things on TV. So we saw the launch in Australia of Max during the week, which is a pretty big deal for me.
You had a night out amongst the stars?
Yeah, I did that. So I went along to the official Max launch in Australia. So it was a screening of the first episode of season 2 of The Last of Us, which I'm under embargo and can't talk about, but that debuts in a few weeks. And when that happens, I do want to do a bit of a deeper conversation around the TV show, because it's interesting, but certainly not one of my favourites. But we'll get into that. Look, it's probably not too much of a thing to say that if you're a fan of the show, I think you'd be very happy with the series return.
And Max, overall, what in 25 words or less, as if that'll happen, what is your thoughts on how Max has handled the launch down here, what it's offering on our small screens, and give us your TV media analyst inside take on it?
Look, keeping it really, really light on, basically the launch library, it's almost every HBO show that you'd kind of think that you want to watch. So it's almost all there, except for there's a few things in there like the Larry Sanders Show, which isn't part of the collection. This is a problem with the US one as well. Dream On, which is one of the classic HBO programs.
I love that, Brian Benben.
Yeah, hasn't been around like ever. You just can't stream it anywhere. It's just one of those lost series. It's got lots of rights. Well, I think it's got lots of rights issues with all the film clips they were using. Yeah. That's just not found anywhere, which is a real shame.
Arliss? Is Arliss there?
No Arliss either. You don't find that it's not on a US Max either. So you do find a lot of those early HBO programs that aren't around. What you do find, though, is that, all the main things are there, like, your Sopranos and your Sex and the Cities, and getting into some of the more obscure things like a John from Cincinnati or How to Make It in America. Sorry, John from Cincinnati is not actually good. How to Make It in America is pretty good. Things like the already forgotten Dustin Hoffman TV series Luck, you'll find that on there. It's got those good sort of deep dive library titles. In terms of the film library, it's got the TCM collection of classic sort of Hollywood in there. All the like obvious titles are there, like Wizard of Oz and Casablanca and whatnot. You'll find all those there. Not a lot of the deep dives, but also it's now 4 days into having launched. It's it's still early days, and quietly I've been told that TCM collection is going to get quite a bit more robust as time goes on, and I presume the same is going to exist for the rest of the movies as well, which I think's a little bit lighter on than you'd want.
Now I'm going to make a confession here, and I hope the feds don't come after me, but I was watching Max while it was a US, the US feed of Max, and it was in beautiful high def, 4K at times, and which suited my television just perfectly. The local Max is not.
I was going to say, as a tech platform, I've actually found that local Max and US Max, they're actually pretty good in terms of that tech delivery.
Oh, really? Because ours was very sort of not grainy, and it was exactly as we expected it to look. So maybe it might be just maybe
it's an internet connection issue.
Maybe, I guess, but it didn't affect the American one. So who knows? Well, I'll definitely check it out.
I guess the question I would have is, how's the VPN set up on your system at home? Is your Mac struggling because it's trying to send a signal US and back again or something?
That may be exactly right. Fiona, I think we figured out the problem with Max.
But look, broadly, I think that Max is pretty good. I think that it's a valued ad to the local market. There was a comment made by one of the Max executives somewhere during the week, and I kind of agree with that 100%, which is that when you are subscribed directly to the pure Max experience, you're probably much more likely to do those deep dives into the older HBO content and have a greater connection with the Max content as a branded offering than you were with those titles sitting on a third-party platform. And I certainly found that, I'd be cruising around on Binge in Australia, which had all the HBO stuff. Yep. And there was probably no way I was going to bother over clicking on, how to make it in America, for example. But when it's sitting there as part of that Max library, it just kind of looks a bit more interesting. I'm not sure what it is. It's just the relationship that you're having with that brand and that sort of experience coming through. So that's kind of interesting. It's a couple of days in. It's going to get better as a launch week. It's actually a really strong launch. So,
can I watch it any other way than as a Foxtel app?
Yes.
All right.
Well,
that may be an issue with
because I have Apple TV at home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So download the Max app onto my Apple TV, and
I'd suggest you were probably watching the US version of Max through your Apple TV anyway.
I was.
Yeah. It's the same app.
Okay.
It just switches territory. So however your VPN set, it'll determine where you're located in the world, and
this is all good to know.
Serve you that up. Anyway, so Max is good, and the other thing I teased flying high at the very beginning.
Yes.
As we record this on Friday, the 4th of April, there are 3 really exciting things that happen in my inbox. So, 2 of these are wide things where, and this is the Flying High connection, we saw the first teaser trailer for the new Naked Gun movie from the Files of Police Squad.
Yes.
That's Liam Neeson in the Frank Drebin's son's role. Have you watched this trailer yet, Simon?
I have not. I haven't caught up with a lot of the stuff coming out of CinemaCon, the big theatre owners convention which is happening, but I have been tracking it, and I've got a list of trailers I've got to watch, this being one of them.
Okay, look, I will say, having watched this, it kind of made me feel nostalgic for instead watching Naked Gun 33 1/3.
All right, okay, well, we'll have to check that out. There's been some good ones coming out of there.
Sorry, boy, was I not into that trailer. The other thing is that there's an extended 4-minute preview of the Superman movie, which
yes, I thought you'd mention that.
I've got a tab open right here, and it is a testament to my willingness to do this podcast with you, Simon, that I have not pressed play on this just yet.
You're surprisingly not as distracted as I thought you'd be right now, given that I only got that email literally 3 minutes before we started this podcast, so I'm also very excited. The trailers, I love CinemaCon. I'd love to go to CinemaCon one year because the stars come out and they have that very positive attitude about what's going to be in cinemas in the year ahead and how cinema's going to be saved. That's still got an asterisk next to it.
It's weird. I feel that hasn't been the conversation this year.
No, I know it's been it's been kind of a moody gathering from what I understand. CinemaCon, a lot of upbeat from the studios, and there's certainly some product there that has us all hoping that people are going to come flocking back to the cinemas in the way they did previously. But
isn't that the overall status quo of the situation, though, which is that the studios are all very happy with the product, but if you look at what they're doing as, media companies, they've really scaled back the number of releases they're doing every year, which is fine, because it means they're taking on less risk broadly, but they should probably still see that profits are about the same for them by the end of the year on a studio-by-studio basis, but that doesn't help the cinema industry, which CinemaCon's very much about theatrical as an experience, because theatrical needs a constant churn of product. Sure. And if you've got, say, Warner Brothers going from, and look, I don't know the actual volumes that they usually do, but let's say that back in the day they were doing, say, 9 major releases a year and have scaled back to 4. That's a big problem for theaters.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of talk that this year's product, this year's content is kind of more of the same but bigger. There's a bigger Jurassic Park coming out with a fire-breathing T-Rex, which worries me no end.
And Scarlett Johansson, come on.
That's ScarJo, I know.
She's not the dinosaur, to be clear.
She could do it. She's a fine actress. And there's, obviously new Superman and a whole bunch of new things coming out down the pipe. So everyone's quite excited about the standard of product. It's the quantity of product that, as you say, is getting people nervous. But we should really move on and do a review podcast, which is what we promised people.
I said 3 things just because I know it'll annoy me when I do the edit that I never said what that third thing was.
Yes.
I've got an email that landed in my inbox just a moment ago telling me I've got access to screeners for the new Amy Sherman Palladino series, which I am incredibly excited by.
What's the name?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that, because
I knew, because you didn't say it. You didn't know. That's why I asked you.
No, I do know. It's just that it's French, and I'm just concerned I'm going to butcher it terribly. It's like Etoile. It's like Etoile.
Yeah, Etoile.
Etoile?
I think so. French listeners, give us a call, screenwatchingpodcast@gmail.com. Tell us how. I don't know how you tell us how to pronounce something in an email, but this will figure it out.
Just give us a voice memo. Look, the premise of it is that there's a American ballet company and a French ballet company, but both have got financial issues, and so they decide, as a bit of a publicity move, they're going to swap their casts. So they send all the French ballet performers to, I think, New York, and then vice versa.
And this speaks to Middle America. Clashes. This will be a huge hit.
It speaks to Dan Barrett wanting to watch this show. But, it's the creative team behind things like Gilmore Girls and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I think quite importantly to This Is a Premise, Bunheads, which is a little seen but really charming, super fun TV program about a ballet school in, regional, coastal, somewhere in Vegas.
She's got the Midas touch.
Yeah. But no, their shows are always, hugely entertaining. I'm very keen to see this one.
All right. Speaking of hugely entertaining, let's get on with the rest of the podcast.
Okay. Well, then, Simon, Minecraft.
Do we drop a sting in there at all?
No, we don't do it anymore.
We don't do it anymore. I really should.
We haven't done it for like months now.
Really?
Yeah. It doesn't stop us from building up to like there being a sting. But look, Simon, you're going to take a look at Minecraft, the movie. Let's watch a clip.
In the overworld,
wow,
anything you can dream about, you can create.
So they built all this?
Yeah, most of it.
Hold up.
that thing doesn't understand a word you're saying.
We're talking.
Life here was perfect. Until one day, flint and steel, we came across the Nether.
Well, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Have you ever played Minecraft, the video game?
It's a video game?
Okay. On with the review.
No. In preparation for watching the film and doing this review, I did jump on one of the Tubies or one of the Plex and watched a couple of 40-minute documentaries about the boom that is Minecraft. So I have some idea of how the people are looking, how much the people are looking forward to Minecraft the movie, and the sort of numbers it's done as a video game. So I get that it's a phenomenon. Just quickly, the plot of a Minecraft movie, as it's been very cleverly called: desperate to find the cubic component that will fill the hole in his soul, office nobody Steve, and the name Steve is an absolute reference back to the original Minecraft and the key person at the centre of the game, who's played by Jack Black, who's as animated as his surrounds are in this. He's doing the same shtick, but doing it with a lot of energy. He embraces life in the overworld, which is, I guess, kind of an Oz-like fantasy realm that rewards creativity, and I think that's one of the key aspects of Minecraft the game. It's not a full-on conflict or shoot-'em-up kind of game. It is one that rewards creativity, and that's really lent into in the movie. Also thrust into this world is a nebbish teenager played by Sebastian Hansen, his older sister guardian, Emma Myers, who fans of Wednesday will know as Wednesday's Offsider in that series, a very out-of-place real estate agent played by the lovely Danielle Brooks, and a has-been gamer who is Jason Momoa. Now, he brings a lot of very big giggles to this. He's having as much fun as everybody else in the cast. It shows him to be a really self-deprecating kind of comedian. This is kind of the thing that The Rock has had a handle on all these years, but Momoa seems to be leaning into it too, which is good. They have to find an orb to get back home while fighting zombies and thwarting warrior pigs. So there's all this other stuff going on that I'm not going to get into, but you will enjoy as you watch this. Now, it's all directed by Jared Hess, who brings to this, I guess you could say, the eccentricities of his biggest hit to date, which was Napoleon Dynamite, but he's also able to carry the demands of a studio franchise Kickstarter. I absolutely am certain that he's looking over his shoulder, making sure the gatekeepers of this billion-dollar source material are being appeased. But it's a sandbox, that's another reference, in which he seems happy playing. Now, I'm no gamer, so I can't speak to how fully the game experience is captured here on screen, but as a film goer, I found a Minecraft movie to be a very joyous, a very silly, a very spectacularly giddy romp of a film, and I had a good time watching it. So that says a lot for a film like this, and it really looks beautiful in parts. So I really enjoyed a Minecraft movie.
Yeah, I read a review of it this morning from another, critical boffin, and they're pretty much the sort of overall view on it was that the bits that feel like a Jared Hess movie are what work about the film, and then as they try to, shoehorn in the Minecraft connective tissue, that's where the film sort of falls apart a bit.
Yeah, look, well, without from the couple of documentaries that I watched on Minecraft to give me some idea of the context of this film, I can absolutely pick up where they're referencing the game, where they're absolutely taking from the game to make it part of the film. The use of blocks and the building of vast civilizations is certainly brought alive in the film. And I think the fact that you've got Jack Black right at the centre of it, ably supported by Jason Momoa, bringing big performances in this setting, with material that works.
Jason Momoa, well known for his subtle performances.
Well, exactly, yeah. But when they're, like, in the past, in things like Gulliver's Travels and a couple of the other, and maybe even the second Jumanji film, where Jack Black's tried to be Jack Black without the material to support him, it can really grate on me. Like, I can really see where he's struggling to make the audience laugh. In this one, he creates a really interesting and fun character while also having a bit of an emotional core, as the film does. The two youngest stars, Sebastian Hansen and Emma Myers, they have a connection that is carried from the real world into the overworld and back again, which makes for a meaningful journey throughout. This one, obviously, it's not going to win Academy Awards. It's not that sort of movie. But in the realm of video games made into movies, when we went from the terrible Super Mario Brothers to the really good Super Mario Brothers, this one is definitely a post-Super Mario Brothers movie in that it's kind of being inventive enough while still honouring the game. So yeah, I really enjoyed.
So look, the real question is, you're a parent who's being dragged along because your 9-year-old's really into Minecraft. Are you going to have a good time or a bad time?
No, you'll have a good time. There's enough in here. There's enough in here for this is family viewing for all ages, not just for the pre-teens or the mid-teens or whatever. This one is something that a family of the Brady Bunch could go along to.
Cool. Now, if getting along to the Minecraft movie isn't necessarily what you're looking for this weekend, or Dogman, which I believe is in cinemas this weekend too, as the school holidays, you might want to sit on the couch and watch the new Netflix drama Pulse. Let's watch a clip.
Hey.
I don't want to get chief because we're sleeping together.
Oh, boy.
It's not fair.
You're panicking?
Of course I am panicking.
You wanted this.
Oh, God. Sorry.
Okay, I got 2 incoming. Bus crash on their way in.
With an amputated hand.
He's critical.
One force choking to the chest. BZ's crashing.
Let's go!
Let's intubate her.
You need to move faster.
We should start compressions.
We can't wait.
He's gonna code 3, 2, 1. Checking for pulse. Anybody have a pulse?
Simon, there is a shift that's been happening in the TV landscape for the last, we'll say, year and a half now.
That's a big opening. Let's see where you go with this. Okay.
Maybe it's a year. I can't remember my chronology. It's a year and a half, we'll say this. We're seeing this real shift of TV where it's moving away from the 8-hour movie towards more like episodic TV. And we've talked about this a bit on the podcast already.
We have,
but the whole sort of spirit of this is that, and think about like where the shift has really come from. You've got two things. One, since Netflix really sort of kicked off with original series back in, 2013, 2014 with House of Cards, what you've started seeing is like this sort of day drop where it's like, here's 8, 10, 12, 14 episodes, well, not really that many, somewhere between usually 6 to 13 episodes, you think.
Sure.
Because there was so many TV shows that have been produced over that sort of, we'll call it the, next 10 years. Because there was so much TV being produced at that time, there was a lot of people who weren't necessarily experienced at making TV, but really were coming from the film theatrical side of the industry, who were either being given their shot to make a TV program, or were effectively taking their movie ideas and bringing them to the screen. And suddenly what you get is the annoyance that I had listening to a lot of talent on the sort of publicity tour, sort of leading towards the release of their shows, where they'd be asked about, the thing, and I'd always say, oh, it's not really a TV program, it's more like an 8-hour movie. And I'm going to bust out the line that I always say here, which is that if you release an 8-hour movie somewhere, people don't want to watch that. Okay, it's not the form. TV is a different form to cinema. And so for the last 10 years, I think there's been a lot of viewers, much like myself, who've been somewhat disheartened by a lot of the prestige TV programs because, yes, they've got big budgets and interesting sort of actors and talent involved in them, but the actual sort of form, the product they were delivering was anything but prestige because it may have the hallmarks of being prestige, but it's not actually a quality product that they're releasing. There's not a lot of thought and consideration into what is the format of the serialized product that we have, because TV should be serialized or standalone episodes. It shouldn't necessarily be, to be continued with a cliffhanger on the end of every episode to bring this sort of, 8-hour movie to existence.
You're absolutely right. I think that's why Adolescence is making the markets made with everyone, because I think it gets that aspect of television right.
Yeah, so look, there's been a bit of a shift in the last couple of years towards getting a little bit more to feeling a bit more traditionally TV. So you can feel this already taking place at streamers like Netflix, where they've been greenlighting more shows like, say, The Diplomat, which is a show that I've really loved, and that, while certainly it is a show which has a full story over the course of 6 episodes, every episode is a little bit more standalone and provides a bit more of that sort of old school TV vibe around it all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Self-contained narrative that...
Not quite self-contained, but it's self-contained enough.
It can flow on, but it is still its own story as well. Yep.
Yeah, and it felt very much like an NBC drama from 2001 just transplanted over onto Netflix. So... Sure. That was cool, you're seeing that sort of thing happen. And then also, the other thing that's kind of happened was that we had the writer and actor strikes from 2 years ago now. And so that completely just upended all production. But what was able to come back really, really quickly was US network broadcast TV. And so within about a month of the strikes ending, they already had content churning out because they've got the machinery in place to be able to get productions back up and running. It's not like Netflix where they really are starting a production from ground zero. That's not a phrase you can use. That's got other connotations these days. But you can't just start at ground up. You need to, because you have to go and hire technical people that can do things, and there's a lot to do. Whereas these are existing, there's existing architecture for them to be able to get up and running again. What's happened as a result is that there's been a renewed interest in broadcast TV. So people are talking a lot more about shows like, say, Law and Order and NCIS and all these kinds of programs because they were kind of the only fresh product that was around there for a little while. And so suddenly people are like, oh, wait, I kind of actually enjoy watching this kind of stuff. So we're now like a year and a bit on from the strikes, and you're finding this revival of people interested in broadcast TV again. You look at CBS, which has always had a pretty strong lean towards the procedural, but I think they've greenlit 10 TV shows for their upcoming season, or, renewed. Of those, 8 of those are procedurals.
Wow. Okay.
So there's very much this
definitely
push.
Yeah. The
That is where
downside
TV's
is
going.
the downside of that is that it can be safe storytelling and doesn't really challenge too much.
Yeah.
But the upside is that people are watching it. It brings back an old school style of television, which is also good.
That's fine. And I mean, I would sort of argue that a lot of these 8-hour movies that you're seeing coming from the streamers over the years, while they may have ideas that are challenging, very rarely did I actually ever find myself challenged by a lot of those programs. Sure. So if we're going to say, hey, look, what's the benefit of that? I wasn't seeing a lot of upside. I was more thinking, hey, I'm not actually enjoying this in the way that, just TV can be enjoyable.
And when the good stuff hits, it's really good, like Poker Face, which speaks to what we're talking about. It was one of the things we loved the most the last couple of years.
Yeah. And so in the last couple of months, I've been raving about The Pitt, which is a effort to do a hospital drama, kind of like ER, where it's the guys that made ER, it's the star of ER that's been transplanted over into it. But then they took the sort of thing of what worked about a broadcast procedural and then adapted it for the streaming landscape, which is that, hey, we're going to do 15 episodes of this TV show, so already longer episode count. But what they did with that show to make it a bit more sort of streaming friendly was that you can watch every hour of that and have a self-contained story taking place, but there's carryover threads that sort of weave their way through the season, and you're actually watching it in real time, where the idea is you watch at the beginning of the shift, at the beginning of the season, watch the 15 hours these people are all working to get to the end of the season, and so you really are getting a full onslaught of the stresses that builds over 15 episodes, and it works in that streaming space.
Which means you clearly love the Pulse.
Well, that's one of the things. So it leads us very much to what's happening here at Pulse, which is Netflix are doing nothing as ambitious as The Pitt, with a 15-episode effort to try to get back to an old-school style TV program. But instead, they kind of thought, well, what if we just do 8 episodes of a classic sort of procedural? So they looked around, and instead of thinking about, hey, what's maybe one of the more artistically interesting ones, which being ER, ER... If you watch an episode of ER, it's a lot of really grounded human drama and just great direction, really strong acting for the most part. It's a really well-considered drama. Instead of going down that path, they maybe looked at, let's do our Grey's Anatomy. And so here's Pulse. Pulse, I'm going to give you the log line, and I actually had to hunt around for this because no one's really talking it up much, and suddenly it's just disappeared from my screen. Follows the personal and professional lives of doctors and staff at a busy Miami trauma center. And that's pretty much it. We're in an ER again. We've got a cast of very attractive young people. We've got Willa Fitzgerald, who people may know from... she was in the Scream TV series back in the day. You've got Colin Woodall, who is an actor from, I think, The Vampire Diaries. As a senior presence in the program, so she's the head overseeing the various departments. You got Justina Mercado, who people would know as the mother from the One Day at a Time revival series on Netflix a few years ago. Jack Bannon's in this, who's got a very British accent, and he plays a very British figure in this. He's a bit of an arse, but he's you kind of want to like him anyway. People would know him as the titular Pennyworth from the Pennyworth TV program.
Son of Ian Bannon, you think the great English actor? I wonder. Bannon. I'll do some research on that while you're gabbing on.
You've got Jesse T. Usher, who people would know from The Boys. He plays A-Frame. So you've got, and also playing a really sort of minor supporting role is Nestor Carbonell, who people know from...
What a great name, Nestor Carbonell.
You know Nestor Carbonell, don't you?
No, I don't.
You know him by
people
face.
Know that. Yeah, okay, maybe I don't.
I absolutely promise you know who he is. He's been in every TV show ever since ever.
Okay.
Basically, it's lots of young people. Everyone's got their own little bit of trauma that they're bringing to it all. There's internal sort of relationships and infighting, and it's just Grey's Anatomy, but it's 8 episodes. It's on Netflix. If that's something that you'd be interested in, take a gander, but I found myself sitting watching it very stone-faced because you got lots of people acting in a way that people don't really necessarily behave. You got professionals who feel like they're acting the roles of being professionals rather than actually being professionals themselves. It was a show which was never going to work for me. This was never going to be the thing I was going to be particularly sort of super excited by. But coming off the back of The Pitt, which does this so well, where you've got actual medical professionals who are part of the writing team and providing insights into what it's like to be a doctor in 2025 as you're dealing with the stresses of patients. You're dealing with potential violence coming from patients being directed at doctors and nurses. You're dealing with issues to do with just drugs and the opioid sort of situations, sort of that's really sort of threatening a lot of US health. You've got this week's episode of The Pitt, which the episode drops in a few hours. There's an extended conversation about people that have gotten all their research off Google rather than actually believing what the doctors are telling them there in the room.
Google.
Yeah, and the Dr. Google storyline is absolutely one of the strongest ones, like, from the season. Boy, you'll get so angry watching the storyline with these parents who are trying to do the best for their kid, but just relying on what the internet's told them. It's something. But, like, that's really sort of strong drama that you can believe in. This is just fluffy, confected TV, and if you're up for that, go for it. You know, go with God, but this was not for me.
All right, just an update on Mr. Bannon, not
which
the son,
everyone's waiting for.
Not the son of actor Ian Bannon. In fact, it is spelt differently. But I will point out, and you buried the lead a bit here, that this stars an actress called Jessica Roth, who we know as the lead from the Happy Death Day movies, which were hilarious, and she's terrific, and I'll probably watch it just because she's in it. All right, so that's The Pulse, or Pulse. It's just Pulse, isn't it?
Just Pulse?
Ironic, because it seems
Jessica
to lack
Roth?
one.
Because she's not one of the leads.
She's in 8 episodes. She plays Cass Himmelstein.
Oh, it's Cass Himmelstein. Sorry, I'm looking through the IMDb right now. I'm just not even seeing
she's
it.
well down the cast list. She's like a couple of...
Look,
but she's in
I would
8
suggest...
episodes. Maybe she comes in later, a little bit later on.
Oh, no, well, I mean, I've seen an episode, which I could not get beyond that. But she's certainly not prominent in that first episode, Simon. I suspect that what you might be seeing here is a supporting to background character.
Well, 8 eps. How many in the series? 10 eps in the series?
Yeah, but like hospital dramas have like, you know, the administrator that gets one line every like 3 episodes. It's just there in the background.
Jessica Roth's a pretty big deal. That's a good score. I think she's been brought in to bolster up the cast.
Look, I'm excited to hear that she's in this program and to hear her name for the first time ever. Simon Foster, let's quickly wind this out. What else have you been watching? Tell us.
Oh, look, I'm glad you asked. I did get along to see Dogman, which is the new DreamWorks animation film. Do you remember when DreamWorks launched back in the late 90s, early zeros, they had the whole industry wondering if they could compete with the Disneys or the Pixars, and it kind of got off to a very rocky start. They had Ants and they had Shrek, which was good. They had The Prince of Egypt and Shark Tale, which was bad.
It's funny hearing this sort of comparison thing of, Ants and a Bug's Tale, when I've just talked about Pulse and The Pit back to back.
No, it's very true. There's this is sort of the comparison that it draws. Now, right now, 2 decades later, I'd almost put the argument forward that DreamWorks Animation are doing the best cartoon content out of the US. Over the last couple of years, they've had The Bad Guys, they've had Orion in the Dark. Last year, they had The Wild Robot. And with Dogman, they really double down on creativity and bringing the most inventive kind of American animation to the marketplace. It is a wildly energetic, very humane, very funny adaptation of Dave Pilkey's crime-fighting canine human cop hybrid hero that'll thrill kids and to your point raised earlier, also delightfully distract adults as well. So I really enjoyed Dogman. It's such a fun movie. You've got to check it out. Wild and a bit dark for your little one.
Well, this is kind of the thing. So I was very keen to get the kid out of the house last weekend. There was some advanced screenings of Dogman. I thought, perfect. Then I watched the trailer and I was like, it's just a bit too old.
Yeah, it's a little bit too old. Yeah, the themes and the ideas in it, there's a very strong sort of underlying family story as well. Plus your lead character, Dogman, doesn't say anything. It's a bit of a Wallace and Gromit type situation. So, but that doesn't sort of undermine his character or his skill as a fun leading man. It's got some terrific stuff in it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Pete Davidson is terrific as Petey the Cat, the main villain in this one. He does some great voice work in this.
Well, he was born to play.
Now, when I say to you Tom Green, what conjures in your mind?
Well, look, I mean, there's a certain Freddy that got fingered.
Yes.
There's the Charlie's Angels cameo, which was always a bit delightfully odd.
With his girlfriend, Drew Barrymore, yep.
There was his TV show, which I know I certainly tried watching a couple of times.
Yep. Okay, so all of that is covered in This Is the Tom Green documentary. He's actually making a documentary about himself. He has left Hollywood, set up a ranch-style existence in a part of Canada, which looks beautiful.
Which is where he's from.
Which is where he's from. And this revisits moments in his career and his Hollywood trajectory from his Canadian roots through the MTV days, and right up to the moment when Freddie Got Fingered came out and everybody reacted like it was a crime against man. I think it's a hilarious film, and has a huge cult following at this stage for just doing... He always went that extra degree in terms of, some would say creativity, some would say distastefulness, some would say ingenuity, others would say crassness. So no matter what side of the fence you sit on with Tom Green, he looks at that and examines that from his own perspective over the years. This is a really entertaining documentary. It certainly dives deep into the testicular cancer that he suffered and his losing of one testicle as part of the recovery process there. His meetings with his heroes like Dave Letterman and getting on that show, and some of the early cable TV stuff is great to watch as well. So he was a fairly big sort of media figure from my early 90s through to sort of mid-2000s as a young man watching television and watching the movies. So it was great to see him as a much older man now, and obviously a man who's been through a lot of hardship, both not of his own doing and some of his own doing. But I found this a really lovely documentary.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'll definitely check that out.
He did ask me to ask you, what else have you been watching?
Oh, that was very nice of him. Very quickly, I checked out the new sitcom on Disney Plus here in Australia, Hulu in the US. It's called Mid-Century Modern. This is Nathan Lane. Sorry, I wasn't going to do this, and then Simon just mentioned it right before we started recording, so I'm not actually prepared to talk about this at all. It's got, what's his name in it? You know, that guy?
Matt Bomer.
Matt Bomer, that's exactly who I was thinking
of. And Nathan Lane and that third one, whose name we don't remember.
The third guy, who I didn't know at all prior to going into this one. Yeah, look, so this is a very traditional multi-cam sitcom that the advanced buzz was saying, hey, look, it's about three gay men who are sort of getting a bit older in life. Matt Bomer, obviously, is a younger person, but, you know, Matt Bomer's still, like mid to late 40s at this point, so he's not that young. I mean, very young, because I'm obviously very similarly to, you know, vintaged. But what we're seeing here is a show which they are billing to be a bit like the Golden Girls. And the thing with the Golden Girls is that you can sort of look at it as being it's three friends and, you know, their mother, titular fourth friend, all like dealing with, you know, being sort of older people living together. But it was so much more a show about very specifically women living together. Like, this was a show where when you're watching it, they were dealing with the fact that, and this is a show that was born of the late 80s as well, so we really are talking about a different sort of generation. Predominantly women in their 50s who are right towards the end of their career, who had largely, for two of the women certainly in the group, been stay-at-home mothers, people who hadn't really sort of forged a career. These are women who'd lost their husbands through either divorce or through death and were really struggling to find their way on their own. That doesn't exist really in 2025, because to do that you have to have women who are much older, and so you really are looking at an entirely different dynamic. When you watch The Golden Girls, it is actually surprising to see how much that program is about economic hardship. Quite often it's about them trying to find like an extra side job somewhere so they can afford to, you know, keep living. It's an actual grounded, realistic as a, you know, goofy 80s sitcom can be, but there's actually some real sort of pathos to that
dealt
TV
with
program.
Issues. Yeah, absolutely it did.
This doesn't. It is a fantasy idea of three gay guys who are living in a very fancy house together because the Nathan Lane character has this house. He doesn't want to live there by himself and is like, you know, guys, come in, move in, and so it's fun and frivolity. And, like, that's fine if you want to watch a dumb sitcom about, you know, three friends living together. Like, perfectly cool. But it's certainly not a modern-day Golden Girls. Golden Girls had so much more going on in it than I think people have really given it credit for.
I thought it might have been of note because it is the last small screen appearance of the great Linda Lavin before she passed away. She's in 10 episodes of this, full 10-episode arc. It also features in later episodes Pamela Adlon, who's done some amazing work on television over the years, and one of your favourites, Richard Kind. So I just thought there was a sitcom legacy in amongst this that made it worthwhile chatting about. But all reviews, including yours to date, have been somewhat, not so much scathing, just a bit meh.
It's just a bit of a nothing program. And look, if we want to talk about that sitcom legacy, it goes back to right what I was saying at the beginning of this, which is that in the early to mid 2010s, you saw the rise of Netflix and a bit of a disappearance of interest in those sort of broadcast TV programs. The traditional multicam sitcom was a vital part of television leading right up to the early 2000s, certainly held in there by programs like Friends and The Big Bang Theory. But certainly there were far fewer of the multicam sitcoms by the time The Big Bang Theory went off the air. There's a couple around these days, but what you lost with all these shows going off the air is that this sort of technical skill and precision in terms of teaching up-and-coming sitcom writers how to write and craft a sitcom, that's been lost. And so if you look at the current crop of sitcoms that are around now, it feels like people who may have sort of come up watching sitcoms but haven't necessarily grown up creating sitcoms in terms of their professional development. So they're certainly around, but there is definitely an element of craft that's been lost somewhere between the sort of dying embers of the sitcom being kind of cool in the late 90s through to 25 years later as these new like crop of sitcoms are coming up. And this to me feels... So what sort of filled the absence of traditional sitcoms in the 2000s, and you saw a lot of sitcom writers gravitate towards this, is those Nickelodeon teen kid sitcoms. And so when you're watching a sitcom made for adults in the current moment, it feels so much like the comedic beats are these Nickelodeon kid sitcoms, which felt like sitcoms but weren't really as substantial, I guess.
For me, and this is something I'm kind of just forming an opinion on now, so forgive me if I'm way off. I think
that's what it's all about.
For me...
nothing fully formed, please.
A turning point in terms of the dying art of the multi-camera sitcom, but the emergence of a really creative single-camera sitcom was Malcolm in the Middle. That could have very easily been a couch, home-setting, multi-camera sort of sitcom with those characters, but it was given a creative energy with the use of single camera and no laugh track and that sort of thing, and that I thought that was a fairly major turning point.
Look, 10 years prior, it certainly would have been a very traditional sitcom, had the show been pitched at that point. When Malcolm in the Middle started, which was, like 2003-ish?
Really? Was it that recent? I thought that was in late 90s, maybe. I'm not sure.
Maybe it was, but it certainly came up as that crop of shows that you started finding from around 1998 onwards. So there was a year that the ABC network in the US did Sports Night and The Job. And neither Sports Night or The Job, Sports Night lasted 2 seasons. The Job didn't see ours. I think it's
Arliss?
one season.
What about Arliss?
Well, Arliss was HBO, so that's not network. Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to get Arliss into this podcast somehow, Dan.
These were shows which very much sort of borrowed from that trend that you were starting to see from the cable TV industry with shows like Arliss, with the Larry Sanders Show, with these single camera comedies. They tried bringing that to network. It took a couple of years for that to really start taking off, but it started hitting with Malcolm in the Middle, The Office in 2004. You started seeing these shows really finding their voice as single camera comedies. And the audience in the US particularly learning how to be able to watch that sort of a program.
I think that brings us to the end of the podcast. Oh, no, wait. You were watching something about... You're going to talk about the last couple of movies you watched as part of your March Movie Madness Odyssey.
Yeah, it was a bid to watch a movie every day of the month.
Did you manage that, though? You pulled that off, didn't you?
I did 31 days of movies.
Good Lord.
If I'd planned, I would have done this in February.
Well, you still had a job then.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But look, this wasn't just because I found myself, unemployed largely through the month of March. It was largely because I just started doing it. I found myself, I was on like this sort of tear where for a week I just managed to watch a movie every day. And I was like, you know what? I wonder if I can do this for a full month.
Yeah, this is what I do. We're recording this at 10 o'clock in the morning. I've already watched one movie today, so...
Jesus Christ. Okay.
I know.
So look, I've talked about this the last 3 weeks, so I'm just going to wind out my month. This is the last things I watched.
And I'll weigh in with my wisdom, my aged know-it-all.
And the spirit of this month of movies was that I was largely watching things I hadn't seen before or had, just maybe seen once or in parts.
But knew of and you wanted to catch up on. Okay,
yeah.
So
So, and then a couple of times I did watch things that I just blatantly just want to watch again. So, like, you know,
We all
I
have
watched
those
RKO
films.
281, for example, and, you know, I've seen that many times before, but, you know, how could I resist? Buckaroo Banzai, but I think we talked about this last week.
That was last week, yes. Your daughter danced to the end credits. Love it.
Yeah. Michael Cleason.
Did that last week.
Extreme Prejudice. Did we do that last week?
Well, we did that for the podcast, yes.
We did. Sorry, that was for the podcast, which is coming out next week or whenever I get to editing it. Then I don't have many films left. I've got Consenting Adults, which
All right,
is...
give me the rundown.
So, look, this is a film. It's Kevin Kline. It's Kevin Spacey. Remember that guy? Whatever happened to him? And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantano.
Beautiful.
Mastrantano.
Mastrantano, yep.
Yeah.
Maid Marian.
Yeah, so the premise of this one is that you've got this couple that are living a pretty standard suburban life, a little bit more upmarket than most, but, you know, just pretty standard suburbia. Couple move in next door, and, you know, suddenly free-spirited people. So the guy played by Kevin Spacey... What's that?
Keys in the bowl, sort of free-spirited, you mean?
A little bit.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we're edging on that sort of thing. You got Kevin Spacey, he's like a sales guy, so he's already going to be a bit awful. So you got him, you've got his wife, who is does some jazz singing down at the local club.
Nice.
So, you know, it's a little bit free-spirited, a little bit, you know, wild. They don't have any kids. Maybe a bit of key in the bowl action sometime in their life. But it's about, you know, these couple sexually alluring to both the Kevin Kline and Mary Elizabeth characters.
Steamy suburban stuff, eh?
So yeah, and it doesn't take much for suddenly Kevin Spacey's wife to be found dead, Kevin Kline's character being framed for the murder, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantano's character now living with Kevin Spacey's character in a new house some distance away.
Really?
Do you not remember this film? It is awful. It's a terrible film.
I remember it. Didn't it have some big name director? Like, is it an Alan Pakula film? It is an Alan Pakula film, yeah.
100%.
Right. This had a lot of pedigree about it, because... Wow.
Yeah, so I sat down expecting to watch this going, you know what, this is going to be a quiet, small little thriller that no one really talks about anymore, but is going to be just quietly a little bit of fun, and I'm going to really enjoy this. And I did not. This was just shamefully just awful.
Wow.
The next night, though, I watched Running Scared, which has certainly been on a list of things that I knew existed as a movie, knew nothing about the movie other than Billy Crystal being in it.
Yeah.
Okay, 1986
This is where you and
film.
This is where you and I differ a little bit, because you'd never heard of this, where I spent the best part of my high school years watching this on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, look, and we've been doing this podcast about the films of 1987, and the one thing that Simon's really come to terms with, I think, as we've been going through the process of some of the earlier films from the year, is that the films that really resonated with him back in 1987 may not necessarily have the same lure in 2025.
Not that good.
Yeah.
Not that good.
Running Scared, I'm very happy to say, is a stone cold classic. And if you're like me and have never watched Running Scared, check it out. It is a lot of fun. Not everything works about it. Like, some things are a little bit sort of cloying, a little bit overly cute. But you got Billy Crystal up against Gregory Hines. The two of them are police cops. They have been on the beat for a while together. They don't necessarily take the role as seriously as they probably should. It's a lot of wisecracking. It's a lot of just trying to make each other laugh. And then they get involved in a... well, I mean, they're always involved in some sort of heavy-duty crime elements, but they're just trying to find, like, the funny in it. But things get a little bit more serious when they're dealing with the likes of...
Jimmy Smits.
Jimmy Smits as the drug dealer that
A lot
lives.
of people forget the darker elements of Beverly Hills Cop, and I think Running Scared, of all those sort of buddy comedy cop on the street type movies that came in the wake of Beverly Hills Cop, Running Scared gets as close to that. I thought Running Scared and 48 Hours were the two that I think were
I'd say
spoken of in the same breath as Beverly Hills Cop.
For the 80s time period, like, you can look at Beverly Hills Cop, you can look at 48 Hours, you can look at Running Scared and Lethal Weapon, all as like the sort of, unified thing of it. It's laughs, it's action, but like it's quite a bit darker than you probably expect. But Running Scared, fantastic. I really had a great time with it. Amazing supporting actors in it as well. So you got a cast that involves Stephen Bowers in there, Joey Pants Lano.
Love the Joey Pants, friend of the podcast.
Dan Hedaya is in there. John Grease, who... Look, I only really discovered who John Grease was by way of The White Lotus. But now that I know who he is, he's been in every movie ever. That
Been around
guy.
for a long time. He was one of the homeless who wore the puffy shirt at
Yeah.
the end of that Seinfeld episode.
Absolutely. Like, he's just literally in everything. And I've watched a bunch of movies and TV shows in this last week, and John Grease just is cropped up in all of them. He's just constantly there.
I'm having that same moment at the moment with Giancarlo Esposito. Everything I watch at the moment has got Giancarlo Esposito in it, from Electric State to what did I watch the other night? He's been in like 3 things I've put on the television in the last few days.
Yeah. Like, Giancarlo Esposito has had just one of those careers. Like,
Yeah.
really started getting some proper heat in, like, the late 90s. He was, like, a cast member in Homicide: The Life on the Street for the last 2 seasons of that. And
Yep.
yeah.
Take a
And
drink,
then
everyone. There's Dan's mention of Homicide Life.
Well,
on the
but
Street
just
for
from
the
that
episode.
from that point in, like, his career just suddenly, he just became like that character actor that cropped up in everything.
Everywhere. All right.
Yeah.
That's good movie watching. Is that all your movies?
Also, sorry, just another Seinfeld reference in there. Larry Hankin is in this. Larry Hankin is the guy that played the Kramer actor when they do the Jerry sitcom.
Yep. Who George thought had stolen his raisins.
Yeah, he's also the weird neighbor in the first season or so of Friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry Hankin.
Yeah.
Good name. I think on that note...
Sorry, he's the one that delivers the line with the really great sort of emphasis on, "They fooled me, Jerry. They fooled me."
What a great character actor. What a good bunch of actors we've talked about today.
R.I.P. Larry Hankin.
Oh, really? He's not with us anymore?
A couple of years ago.
We started with death, we end with death. This is why the podcast is like the circle of life. The ashes to ashes, dust to dust. This has gone on for hours. End it we must.
On that note, folks, it's been great. It's been real. You can find us on the internet. Simon's got a movie-based newsletter that he puts out at the screen-space.net URL, correct?
Yep,
Yes.
via the Substack platform. Our newsletter goes out on a weekly basis with lots of interesting stuff in there.
When you say you mean yours?
Yes, mine.
Yeah. I do my own newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching. It comes out 5 times a week, 6 if you include the 2 that come out on Fridays, and I do. It's got all the stories about TV, streaming, and film in there, essays, dumb jokes, photos of Patrick Schwarzenegger. You can find that at alwaysbewatching.com. And Simon and I do a second podcast where we look at the films of 1987. We had a bit of a production gaffe in difficulty sourcing a monkey movie, and that has kind of thrown my editing of the podcast completely out the window. But I'm planning to push out the 7 or 8 episodes we've recorded in the last 2 or 3 weeks and get that happening as soon as possible. Folks, and you can find that one at bestmovieyear.com. Is that a website? I think that's the
Something like
website.
that,
Yeah.
Just good. You'll find it.
We're on
Good
YouTube. We're
listening
on the...
too.
Yeah, it's mostly pretty good.
Looking forward
Simon
to
and
what
I,
we've got saying about the all-nighter. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to have a really fun chat about that in a moment. But folks, this has been Screen Watching. We'll be back next week. I'm going to go watch a Superman trailer. We'll see you later on.
Bye-bye.